Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a really fascinating situation that recently unfolded involving Donald Trump, the Associated Press, and, well, a disagreement over the name of the Gulf of Mexico. Kind of unexpected.
That's right. It started, with the Trump administration pushing for official use of Gulf of America, a name not really used internationally instead of Gulf of Mexico. And it's really kicked off quite a debate about press freedom, with some surprising elements, actually.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics here. The administration essentially mandated this name change, Gulf of America. But the AP, sticking to, standard journalistic practice and international norms, just kept using Gulf of Mexico. And this refusal, it had some pretty big consequences, didn't it?
It really did. The AP apparently found themselves shut out of certain White House events, things like Oval Office meetings, press briefings, basically because they wouldn't use the new terminology, which right away raises flags about, government press relations. It's interesting to think about why they pushed Gulf of America so hard. Was it symbolic for their base, or maybe something more strategic about sovereignty or resources?
Right, because we're not talking about some tiny local pond here. Gulf of Mexico is the name used by pretty much everyone. The UN, international bodies, even as one source mentioned, Webster's Dictionary. I feel like a very unilateral move, trying to just change a globally accepted name like that.
Exactly. And the AP's position was really about journalistic integrity, wasn't it? Using established, recognized names is kind of fundamental for clear, unbiased reporting. Their job isn't just to repeat whatever the government says, especially when the terms aren't, widely used or accepted internationally. Which leads to that basic question, can a government actually punish a news organization for using terminology it doesn't approve of?
Yeah, and that brings us right to the core issue, what a lot of people are calling an attack on press freedom. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE-U, they put out a pretty strong statement, called it viewpoint discrimination, possibly unconstitutional. Their point was, look, the government can call it whatever they want, but they can't punish journalists for using different established terms. Seems pretty straightforward legally.
It does. I mean, the whole point of a free press is its ability to scrutinize power, not just act as a government echo chamber. So when a government starts dictating language to the press and then penalizes them for not complying, well, that sets a really dangerous precedent. It suggests that a news organization's access, its ability to report freely, depends on sticking to the government's preferred narrative. When we talk press freedom here, it's not just publishing, it's also the independence to use established language without fear of, government pushback.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. This statement from FIRE, it was actually shared on social media by Brit Hume, a Fox News host, which is the central comment, I agree. Now, that feels like a pretty big deal, doesn't it? Someone from a media outlet often seen as, well, supportive of the former president, publicly agreeing with criticism that calls this an attack on press freedom. What do you make of that? It suggests there's maybe a fundamental red line, even across political divides, when it comes to the press.
Oh, it's absolutely significant. Yeah. And while, as the source pointed out, this wasn't necessarily being shouted from the rooftops by other Fox News hosts on air right then, that private acknowledgement, well, public via social media from such prominent conservative figure, it says a lot. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, on the core principle of press freedom, there can be a broader consensus, even in today's really polarized media world. It definitely raises questions about where those fundamental lines are drawn, even for people generally aligned with one political side.
Right. So let's pull this all together. We have the Trump administration trying to rebrand this huge international body of water. The AP says no, sticks to the standard term, and faces consequences getting shut out. Then you get criticism calling it viewpoint discrimination, and surprisingly, a voice from within a generally supportive media outlet basically saying, yeah, this is a problem for press freedom. It really throws that tension into sharp relief, doesn't it? Between the desire for narrative control from the top and the basic role of an independent press. It shows how even a seemingly small thing like a name can blow up into a much larger issue about power and information.
Exactly. And if you step back and look at the bigger picture, it really strikes at the heart of what a free press is in a democracy. The ability for journalists to do their jobs, to report without fear of payback or being told what words to use by the government, that's absolutely critical if the public is going to be informed. When those in power try to control the language used to describe reality itself, well, that can seriously undermine transparency and accountability.
Now, there was another layer to this that I found really insightful. The host of the YouTube video we looked at, they mentioned their own experience living along the Gulf Coast for most of their life. And their point was, Locals don't even really call it the Gulf of Mexico. They just call it the Gulf.
That's a fascinating point, actually. It really highlights this potential disconnect, doesn't it, between what the government wants to call something, the established international name, and how people actually, talk about places in their everyday lives. It adds another layer of, complexity to the administration's insistence on Gulf of America, because it doesn't seem to line up with formal recognition or local usage. Makes you wonder how effective that kind of top-down renaming effort can even be.
Right, so you've got this attempt from the top to impose a name that isn't sticking anywhere. The press pushes back on principle. And the people who actually live there, they have their own much simpler term anyway. It makes the whole Gulf of America thing seem even more, I don't know, detached from reality.
Yeah.
It's interesting, that local preference for just the Gulf. Does that suggest maybe a broader gap between official names and everyday language? And how might that undermine the Gulf of America push, even setting aside the press resistance?
It certainly could, yeah. It underscores the idea that language and names, they often have deep roots. They aren't easily changed just by decree, especially when there isn't widespread buy-in or a clear, logical reason for it. And then when this attempt to control the language leads to punishing the press for not playing along, well, then it moves way beyond just arguing over what to call some water. It gets right into that critical territory of press freedom and potential government overreach.
Okay, so just to recap everything. We saw this directive to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. The AP deciding, nope, we'll stick with the accepted term. There's subsequent exclusion from White House events, strong criticism from press freedom groups, and that really notable agreement from within Fox News that this was indeed a worrying attack on press freedom.
And we also folded in that perspective from people living along the Gulf Coast who often just call it the Gulf, which kind of further shows the complexities of trying to force a new official name that doesn't really connect with established norms or how people actually talk.
This whole incident, it really spotlights that constant tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between a government's maybe natural desire to shape its own narrative and the absolutely vital role of an independent press in reporting accurately using terms that people actually recognize and understand. It's a powerful reminder that even what looks like a minor argument over words can have pretty significant ripples for fundamental freedoms.
Absolutely. And as you think about all these different angles, the government pushing Gulf of America, the press holding firm on established terminology, the local preference for simply the Gulf, it raises a really important question, for you to ponder. What does this whole episode tell you about the inherent challenges of trying to control information and maybe the enduring power of established names and independent journalism in our world today?